Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Book Wyrm Club. I am here with my fabulous co-host, Kat from Cast Novel Adventures. Hello, Kat.
Hello, Alex.
I'm so happy to see you. Are you excited to talk about our book tonight?
Oh, yes. Yes, yes, yes. For a lot of reasons. One, because I originally was supposed to read this in February for Folklore February and didn't get
Oh,
to it. So that's why I was very excited when you agreed to put this as part of our first season of the Book Wyrm Club, because I'm like, now I'm going to get to it.
I love that. I didn't realize that at the time when you had suggested it, that it was one you were trying to get to. So that's perfect. We still got it in 2024.
I know. So I'm very, very excited because this book has intrigued me for some time.
And of course, the book that we read is Devolution by Max Brooks. So hopefully you all have read it as well along with us. I'm going to go ahead and put a little note up here that if you read it, put in a red heart. If you didn't read it, a black heart. And if you DNF'd it, you're like, I can't do this. Just put a skull in there. But I will be giving a very brief spoiler-free synopsis before we get into, talking about the book. So for those of you who did not read Devolution, this is the story of a Kate who has written a diary about her experiences moving to a very secluded community called Green Loop that is very close to Mount Rainier. And her husband went and moved there to kind of see how things would shake out with their marriage, if you will. And after they get there, there is a natural disaster that occurs, and it is taking place with her diary of all of the events that happen after to her and the people who are now trapped in Green Loop. And it's also intermixed with other interviews from people who found the site, we'll say, after everything that happened. So would you say that's accurate?
Yes, I would say that's very accurate.
Okay, awesome. Fantastic. So I do want to welcome everybody in the comments. So we had Davon who came in early, and so dropping in early, even though I haven't finished the book. Thank you for coming in early. It's totally okay if you haven't finished it yet. But if you're going to join for the chat, hopefully you're okay with spoilers, because we always spoil absolutely everything by the end of the discussion. We can't help it. Cultural Cobwebs is here. Hello. You said hello.
Hello,
Excited to hear.
Liz. This is
Hello, Liz.
Liz.
And very nice to see you, Liz. Thank you for coming. So excited to hear what y'all thought about this one. Yes, absolutely. She gave a black heart, so she did not read it. Okay. And Angel is here. Hello, Angel. I know Angel and her husband, Andrew, are both in right now, and they read it together. They were excited to
Awesome.
join for this live. So thank you both so much for coming.
Yeah,
And
that's
Jamie
good.
is here. Hello, Jamie. And Combat Veteran is saying hello and hello to you too.
Hello.
Welcome. I'm glad you made it. And Miss Faye, who did not read
Hello.
it. Hi, Faye. She said, I didn't read it for book club, but I read it a few months ago and loved it.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Well, you could have put in a red heart. You technically read it.
Yeah,
That
you
would have been
technically
fine.
read it a couple of months ago, so
Yeah, you're a red heart in our book, Faye. But yeah, that's everybody who's coming in so far. Red hearts show up black sometimes. Oh no!
oh,
Okay, so Liz, I'm
oh.
sorry if you actually read it. Yours came up black for some reason.
Yeah, Liz, clarify if you read it or okay, so Faye said
Yeah.
that she did. That should be a red heart, definitely read it. Okay,
Okay.
yay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. So sorry about that. That's weird. So it must be a very specific
I
icon that
think it
shows up
might,
red.
well, it could be depending on what they're using. Because I find sometimes if I'm on my laptop, things look different than if I'm on my iPad.
Oh.
Like if I'm,
Oh, okay. That's okay. Well, we'll keep that in mind in the future, because I know there's a very specific black heart icon. I'll change that next time so we don't do hearts. How about that? I'll make it like specific. I'll do like a knife or something. So it'd be, there's no
oh
confusion.
my gosh, all the
Um,
hearts look red to me. Oh, so you see, that might be what it is. And it could
okay.
be StreamYard. It could be
Okay. It
something
could
with
be.
StreamYard, depending on which heart they picked in their, whatever you want to call it. What do you call it? Collection,
Yeah.
whatever in their collection, depending on what heart they pick, maybe how it shows up on StreamYard is different.
Okay. Well,
I
thank
don't
you
know.
for that clarification. So
Okay.
far,
Whew.
everybody's read it, which is
Yes,
great.
that's awesome.
Which means that we also, of course, want to ask you all, tell us your rating. We want to know, because this is what we do For those of you who haven't joined in a book club meeting before, we always like to give our rating at the beginning, because then we can explain how we feel about it, like as we're going along, and it kind of like justifies it as we go. That is if we've come up with a rating, which we don't technically have to. And then Heidi is here, and Heidi read it. We know Heidi read it. Hello, Heidi.
Yes.
Good to see you. And so, Kat, do you want to start talking about how you felt, or you want me to?
Oh, about the rating, or
Yes.
okay. I was telling Alex I'm teetering on this one. I'm teetering between a 4 and a 5. So I'm kind of landing like 4.5. So what happens when I'm in this kind of a position is, since we're having a book club meeting, probably by the end of our discussion, I will have a concrete rating. Usually, if I don't have a book club discussion, a lot of times if I'm on the fence about a rating, it's when I'm writing out my review on Goodreads. I usually, because I'm reliving it and reflecting and all that kind of stuff, then I'm like, oh yeah, I really did either like it, or no, it didn't land quite so great, or whatever. So this one, it's like, I don't know. I'm on the fence, and I don't know why I'm on the fence. It's just a feeling thing. So
That's fair, because as we'll get into in a little bit later, this is not our first Max Brooks. So, kind of comparing it to other things that he's written, I'm really looking forward to talking about that. Jamie gave it a 5, which is fantastic.
good.
Happy that you loved it. Heidi
Yeah.
gave it a 4. So
Very
she
nice.
enjoyed it. That's
Very nice.
wonderful. And Liz gave it a solid 3, which
Excellent.
is good. 3 is solid, nice middle of the road.
Hey,
and
Linda.
Hi, Linda. Nice to see you. Linda, you should tell us if you read Devolution and what your rating was. Faye said, I was a 4.5 stars too. I love the vibes and the story, but it wasn't quite a 5-star experience. Okay, cool. Heidi says 5-star to me. It has to have incredible prose and humor, plus deep characters and amazing story.
Mm-hmm.
That is very, very, yeah. I know we all have kind of like the way that we rate things. And for me, a 5-star is a book I would read multiple times. A 4-star is a book I would read once, but I really liked it. And a 3 gets down to the territory of like, I could kind of take it or leave it. It wasn't a book that it wasn't a book that did anything unique, but it could be solid. That's kind of how I view a 3.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very happy to say I gave Devolution a solid 4.
Okay,
it's
awesome.
It's a solid 4 to me,
Mm-hmm.
where I'm like, I would read it the one time. I don't know that I'll ever read it again, but I definitely could recommend it to somebody and be like, I think that you would enjoy this. So very excited about that. Andrew said, this is my first book club. Yay! I gave it 5. That's fantastic. So
That's
happy
awesome.
to hear that.
Awesome.
And Faye said, for me, 5-star means there's nothing I would have changed. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's so interesting hearing what different ratings mean to different people. So that's always an important thing to keep in mind. And Angel, along with Andrew, gave it a 5 as well. So you both loved it. That's awesome. I am so happy to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I loved it. Sometimes I can love it and it be a 4 or 4.5. Sometimes I loved Cujo as far as like the writing, the story, all that. That was a 5-star read for me, but I probably will never read it again.
That's fair. Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to ever read that.
I don't know if I could handle the trauma of it again.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So we will be, I'll kind of give a warning when we start heading into the spoiler territory, though it's looking like everybody here read it. So I don't think we have to worry about that this time. But my first question for you, Kat, is have you read other Sasquatch stories?
Not really. I did take a course in college. It was an anthropology class. It was called Fads and Fallacies.
Oh, that's cool.
And it was about topics like urban legends and Bigfoot and, stories like that, Loch Ness and everything. So I do not remember. I mean, that was back in college.
That's fair. Yeah.
So I remember enjoying learning about it, but no, I have not really read, especially any fiction that has to do with Bigfoot.
Okay.
So that's my only experience.
Okay. No, that's great because I can honestly tell you that this is my first one as well. So, I have like weird feelings about cryptids where I'm
Mm,
not obsessed with them. I don't like do a lot of research or anything into them, but I find them interesting enough that I know some stuff about each one, right?
right.
And so my favorite cryptid is Nessie, the Loch Ness monster, because I think Nessie's a fun like kind of
Hmm.
character, right? But I can tell you while I was reading this book, the entire time I was thinking about a friend of mine who does believe in Bigfoot, like
Oh,
110% believes that big feet are real.
oh,
And
wow.
so I don't, sorry to squish anybody's joy. And I personally don't, but I just, if, if they were, this to me seems like it would be the kind of story that depicts the way that they would actually be, if that makes sense. Like, I
Hmm.
really like the way that they're told in here. So, as my first official Sasquatch story, this was a great one.
Hmm. Hmm. I agree. I agree. I'm glad we cut our teeth on it.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. Because I also, as you know, Kat, I'm not a big zombie person, but Max Brooks did World War Z, and I was like, well, dang,
Hmm.
he just knows how to talk about topics I wouldn't normally read about. So that's really cool. So that brings in my next question: is did the Max Brooks, good job, man, did good job. All right, did Max Brooks bring anything new to the depiction of Sasquatch in your mind?
Yes,
Okay.
because I guess whatever. I mean, I've seen like Harry and the Hendersons. That's Bigfoot, correct? Um, and I guess to me, I always, and I know the Yeti is supposed to be like Bigfoot in the Arctic, like part of
Yes.
that family
Yeah,
or
the
whatever.
Himalayas.
So
The
I
Yetis,
always
the
just
Himalayas.
envisioned the Yeti as being the really mean one, like very aggressive, just the way it's portrayed. Like you go to Disney and you ride that mountain, and the Yeti guy. Um, and isn't there a Yeti in one of those? I haven't seen him in a long time. Isn't there a Yeti like in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and he's like
The
aggressive?
Abominable Snowman. The Abominable Snowman was
Okay, was
Rudolph.
is he considered a Yeti though?
I guess he would be. Yeah.
Okay,
I would I guess so.
so those depictions always seem like scary, whereas like Bigfoot, like even the picture, the famous picture of it running in the woods or whatever, it just always seemed like he would be friendly and more afraid of us than we are of it. So I don't know. I was really surprised that it's kind of like comparing Twilight vampires to 30 Days of Night. You know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
like you
Yeah.
think vampires are romantic and stuff when you like look at Twilight or some other ones, but then you watch 30 Days a Night and you realize they're not very friendly.
That's yeah. Yeah, I agree with that where I think Bigfoot, Big Feet do fall into that almost like monster of the week category, if that
Hmm.
makes sense, where it's like, okay, you've got vampires, you've got werewolves, you've got Bigfoot, you've got zombies. It's kind of just, it is a cultural phenomenon. And I know
Mhm.
Faye said, I 110% believe in them. Devolution does make it feel possible. And like I said, I'm not, I don't know everything. So, I mean, for all I know, they are real. But I really like what he brought to this because my depiction, my understanding of Sasquatch was always this idea of like the gentle giant, terrified of people, would run away at the sight of us, like just trying to live in peace, right? But we're
Mhm.
we're hunting
Mhm.
them.
Mhm.
And it's always, I mean, they have freaking TV shows that are dedicated to, finding Sasquatch, right? And like trying to find droppings and trails and everything to see if they can hunt him down. It's like if Sasquatch really, was super aggressive and wanted to hunt people, probably would have like had that experience for those people trying to find them by now, right?
Right.
So I like this idea of them being very animalistic, because I think the other thing about Sasquatch is kind of the depiction of how anthropomorphized they are, which is something that is talked about in this book of like, we do that to animals, you know, all the time. And I think that if a Bigfoot really was out there and really was a wild animal, there's no reason to think that they wouldn't view us as like an us versus them. Like, we're not the same, right? So that to me also felt very realistic. Like all of the little notes in here that talked about chimpanzees and how like the bonobos and everybody, like the gorillas, behave. I loved that because it really did bring a lot of character, I think, to them, because obviously they don't talk. So it's like you feel so much from them and their society and everything, but they don't speak.
Right.
In the whole book, and I love that. Sorry.
Well, I like that it wasn't like a caricature.
Yes, I agree with that too.
You know, because they could have made it, you know, like silly or like a to where it would be less believable in my mind. But, you know, kind of like a Harry and the Hendersons would have been more like a caricature of it than this.
I agree.
And it's the same thing, I think, that happened with World War Z is like, of course, you know, we don't think that they're really zombies, you know, as we know it, that are coming after you to like rip you apart or whatever. However, after reading Max Brooks' book, you're kind of like, oh my gosh, if it did happen, this is pretty terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I loved about it. He like really made it feel like a worldwide pandemic. And Heidi is asking, yeah, were some of the news items real? I don't think the news items were, unless it was like a historical event, but I do know that like the Jane Goodall quotes, you know, like those talking about like the lives of chimps and
yes, that
like
was real. I would think so. Yes.
Yeah.
I did look up one of the authors of the book that he mentioned about Sasquatch, but a book came up, but it wasn't by that author. So apparently there are books out there written by people, but it wasn't specifically the one that was mentioned.
Was that the one where it was supposed to be like the guide? Like the guide to Sasquatch?
Yeah.
I was wondering if he made that up. Kind of like how he, like how he wrote his survival guide for zombies. I was like, oh, that must be like another thing that he is imagining.
And I always tell people the zombie survival guide, if you took the zombie element out of it, it truly is a survival guide. Like you could use it to survive anything that you're dealing with, basically, like say you're lost in the wilderness or whatever. So that's why I think it's kind of cool that, you know, he inserts the zombies and you've got extra elements of it, you know, but there is some factual information in it.
Yeah, no, there's a lot
how
of
he
realistic
marries
stuff.
the realistic stuff with the fictional. Sometimes, and I think you and I talked about this with World War Z, is sometimes you forget that you're reading a piece of fiction. It's like you feel like you're reading nonfiction. You got to remind yourself that this
100% agree with that. Andrew gave a great comment. He says Sasquatch hide and seek champ of the world. Completely agree. Heidi said, if they were real, I do think they would have been discovered by the Lewis and Clark people. It seems like the natives would have left them alone. Another branch of Neanderthals. Yeah. Yeah, we would have interbred with them by now. Like, I don't know. JB said he does a great job of making it real. Yeah, I completely agree. So I'm happy that we both feel like it wasn't just a caricature and that he did bring something. So that's fantastic. He really solidified my feeling of wanting to read more by him. That's for sure. Like he's a very talented author.
I agree. I do agree.
And then I guess since we're talking about Max Brooks, I'll just go ahead and ask, how did this compare to you to other stories like World War Z? Because you've read more by Max Brooks than I have, so you'd have more context.
Well, for me, it's the style of his writing that I enjoy. I enjoy the mixing of real events interspersed with the story that's being told, the narrative. I also like that the settings are realistic as well. Like Mount Rainier really does exist, and you know what I'm saying, and all those things happen, and you're putting these people here, and you know, I don't know if there is a real green loop, but there might be a community like that somewhere, that, you know what I'm saying? So I think he does a lot of research to make it really believable. I like, and this was World War Z was the same way. I like the interviewing. I like the bringing people who are experts in certain fields. I like the fact that he takes something that we might think is far fetched, but by the end of it, you're like, I wonder if that could happen.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would do differently than some of these people, you know, if this would happen. I don't know. I just like his writing style. I like the fact that he takes interesting topics. I love zombies. So, and World War Z was a 4-star read for me. It wasn't like it was a 5-star read for me. It was a 4-star read for me. But I enjoyed it thoroughly because, like I said, you read it, you get immersed in the story. There was no lulls for me. Like even at the beginning, and I think part of that is because he has good characterization.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's developing your characters. You're seeing some characters really develop over the course of the story. So yeah, I mean, I read this, World War Z, and the Survival Guide, and that graphic novel, which is about the stories that are in the Survival Guide of different instances of where zombie activity took place, you know, where they have some kind of evidence of it or whatever. And I've enjoyed all of that I've read. And I just think it's the way he presents it.
Yeah, I agree. So the main thing for me that I noticed was a difference between this book and World War Z is, of course, World War Z is a collection of interviews by
Mm-hmm.
a lot of different people from all over the world about a ton of different experiences. There is no main character in
Right.
World War Z. Whereas this book, Kate is our main character, and she's relaying everything that's going on with the people in this town. So we're getting to know them very intimately, right? So that was the biggest difference for me, is this felt more of like a character driven story
Mm-hmm.
than a book like World War Z. However, I actually put World War Z above this. I like
Oh,
World
really?
War Z. I like World War Z a little bit more than I like Devolution. Even though I typically like character driven stories, those are usually my favorite
Mm-hmm.
ones. And I love the way that he depicted Kate and her growth in this book. But World War Z felt like there was so much detail, like there was
Mm-hmm.
so much more detail in the world than just, the diary of one person accounting, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense because you're only looking through this massacre through the eyes of one person that documented it. Like you can only go by how Kate's point of view of what happened. We didn't get everybody else that was dealing with it the same
Right.
way that Kate was. Whereas in World War Z, you have everything leading up to it, and there's similarities in what people were experiencing, and then there were differences with what people were dealing with the zombies. So they all
Mhm.
had one thing in common, that was the zombies, but their experience and how they had to survive and all that kind of stuff was very different. I kind of liked seeing it from one person's point of view. Although what you say in that, it would have been interesting to get other people's points of view as well. Like if for some reason Tony and Yvette would have like recorded themselves on their phone talking about, why they're doing what they're doing or whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
But it I don't know, it's just very different. And that's why I'm kind of teetering between the 4 and the 5, because it's like I liked watching Kate grow, her arc
Yeah.
from beginning to end.
I agree with that completely. I guess for me, I have discovered while being on BookTube how weirdly I like politics in books, and World War Z is a lot of politics,
Right.
but like not boring and dry politics. And I'm glad because you brought up Tony and Yvette, which that was actually leading into my next question. So great segue. It's speaking of like the little bit of politicking that we get in this book is with Tony and Yvette, right? So I'll read our comments really quick. So Jamie said, "I totally agree with you, Kat. I love his approach to writing. All of his stories have felt real and plausible, even though they're about fantastical
Yes.
creatures." Faye said, "I really want to read World War Z, but haven't, or want to own it rather than get it from the library. I think he's an author I want to collect."
Mm-hmm.
Very fair. Heidi said, "Yeah, we did not get Tony's POV. That would have been something else talking about Tony." So, my next question for you, Kat, is do you think Tony and Vet were, and this was one of the ones you posed, were
Uh-huh.
naive, irresponsible, or just plain clueless for not taking proper precautions in the event of a natural disaster, considering where Green Loop was located, which of course was a very secluded society, like an hour outside of the nearest city?
Yeah, I kind of feel like I don't think they were naive. I don't think they were clueless. I think they were irresponsible, honestly, myself, because and Heidi and I chatted about this in the Discord. I just can't imagine you being located close to a volcano that could erupt and you have no emergency um, plan. I mean, everyone in the United States lives in an area where they could experience some kind of natural disaster. So if you live in a place that you're going to get blizzards and snow, you probably have some kind of a kit in the trunk of your car in case you get stuck in a drift, because you run off the road. Or you live in California or West where you have earthquakes. Surely you have some, or wildfires or whatever.
Mhm.
Surely you have a plan in place, mudslides, whatever. Where I live, hurricanes.
Mhm.
I mean, if I talked to somebody and went through a hurricane and said, I can't believe, I don't have any water for 10 days. I can't believe I can't, I have no electricity. I mean, how? How could that be possible? Hurricane season starts, you start getting your jugs of water, you
Mhm.
start getting your canned food, you will eat weird things on your barbecue pit because you're trying to get rid of all your frozen stuff first. Yes, we grilled a
Mhm.
pizza during Katrina on the barbecue grill.
Oh,
We're
I was
like,
thinking you
we
like
gotta
made a grilled cheese on your car
I'm
engine. I
just
was like, I don't
saying
know what you're
that
doing.
I'm just saying, you will be surprised the things that you need to do knowing that the hurricane is coming.
Oh,
I mean,
sure.
you just do. So the fact, like, we have a generator and we don't even run our generator all night, all day, all night. Like, we ration it, like, because you just can't have it running 24/7 or whatever. So it's like, you do what you got to do in that little short period of time. The fact that they didn't have generators, the fact that they didn't have any kind of supplies in the event that this eruption was going to happen. And then they were joking about it. I mean, literally, Kate and Dan come and they get rumblings or whatever. And they're all just like, doo doo doo, it's not going to get us. I'm like, what planet are you on? I mean, I just thought it was unbelievable. And I thought it was irresponsible. And also, too, that's the one thing that I thought was a little far fetched is that these people trusted them so much that they didn't even question having any kind of preparedness. Like, no one in the community was prepared, not even Kate and Dan. Kate and Dan didn't even know these people. It's like, I mean, she knew her brother and they lived there and nothing happened, but still, they didn't, like, knowing Kate's personality and her anxiety and all that stuff. You would have thought she would have come loaded with all kinds of stuff. I don't know. Maybe it's just
I
me.
I definitely think that it was mostly irresponsibility. Part of it, I do think, was naive. And here's why. So, Tony was the embodiment of an entrepreneurial pie in the sky guy. Like,
Ah,
he's just an entrepreneur at heart, where he's like, I'm just going to go out and I'm going to make this thing and it's going to happen and nothing could possibly go wrong, because as long as I'm here, baby, I'm going to make it happen. Like, that was just the whole vibe that I got from him. And his wife, Yvette, like, she had her own like online yoga thing, and she was obviously very popular, and they were just like this young beautiful entrepreneurial couple, and they're like, no, nothing can go wrong. So they run all these fiber cables out into the mountains, and it's like, oh well, it's almost like they thought there was no way that the internet could ever be cut off, like no possible way, when that's the only way that they can get their food is via drone, right? So that's the main thing, is in terms of living, their houses and the design of them were actually great, right? Because they had the biogas, they had the solar, they had ways to stay warm, stay safe, they had security systems and all of that. But that was the big problem, right? Was the one thing they didn't have was food. And it's like, that's the kind of the main thing you need to be able to live. And so I think for them, the naive thought was that, like, oh well, as long as these cables are buried deep enough underground, like, it's not like we're never going to be able to order our drones. They didn't think the bridge would ever go out and they wouldn't be able to go get food. So as long as the houses are still running, it's fine, right?
yeah.
And oh
Yeah, I mean, did they think their house was going to create food for them? I mean,
yeah,
I just
a
think
Ray
they were
Bradbury
like
novel.
trying to like rely so much on all these modern things or whatever. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm telling you, we had Hurricane Ida here in Louisiana. We had no phone service. We had no cable television. We had no internet. Literally, I had to go across the street under my neighbor's tree with my phone to try to get a signal, or I'd have to walk like way into my subdivision in another part to get somebody on the phone. And then you're lucky if you could, get somebody. And if you did, you got cut off. And then you weren't really going anywhere because you had trees like
Hmm.
blocking your way. So we don't live close to a grocery store or whatever. Like I would have had to go, and that's if the grocery store was even open. Because mind you, they needed electricity to open their
Yeah,
grocery store,
makes
so
sense.
I just think to myself, we live and we don't live isolated like these people. So my thing
Yeah.
is, there is no way, this is just me, there's no way in hell I would have gone to that community without having some kind of preparation.
Yeah,
Like
at
I would
least
have
food.
had a backpack or something to where I could have been able to get out if I needed to.
Hmm.
That's just, I don't know. I think these people were just so like la la la. What do you call that when they're just like, I don't
Pie
know.
in the sky. Really,
Yeah,
they are.
just
It's like
like,
La La Land.
yeah, and that's one of the things that Heidi brought up. She called it the fragility of Green Loop,
Hmm.
because she was like, I loved how they got rid of their books and music as everything was in the cloud. That made me think we too have gone without internet for a moment. Think of those hurricanes and no cell service too. It is interesting that they did not have a landline or one of those satellite phones.
Yep.
She said, I think of the TV show MASH, and even radar was able to dial up headquarters, not even walkie talkie, so that one guy who left could speak to them.
Yeah,
So I,
that goes into our comments we've started getting from some people too. Do you want me to go through
and I
these?
and I agree 100% with what she was saying about that, because it's like, yeah, it was fantastic, and I love that they were living environmentally friendly and they were trying to commune with nature. But the thing about it is, and I don't know if you're going to put that question up that I sent you.
I am. Yeah, I'm gonna put
Okay, so
more
I
up.
won't say anything at that point, but my thing is, when you take yourself out of a familiar element that you have access to the things that you need, and you go into an area you don't, you've got to prepare yourself for that.
Hmm.
You know, I don't know. I personally would not have hung around. That's just me. I would have taken my chances, especially the day that she saw the boulder move in the road. I would have been like, holy hell. And the way the animals were acting strange. You've got to look at your nature. Like, how, like, why are you not paying attention to what is happening with the natural world around you? Animals are your signal, they're your warning. If they're acting freaky, get out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, canary in the coal mine. All the animals running away. Completely agree. Yeah,
Oh.
Jamie said it was like they thought there was no way their tech could fail. Heidi was
Mm-hmm.
like satellite phone, which I think was something that got brought up in the book as well. That like
Mm-hmm.
there wasn't a satellite phone, there wasn't a landline. I think that was literally said in there. And she said, "Do not replace your books with ebooks." That's the reason right there. Don't put it on the cloud.
Oh, right.
Face it, a lot of people don't prep for contingencies. I'm a prepper. People think
Mm-hmm.
I'm cynical or something. Nope, not cynical, because you'll be the
No.
one that has food when something goes wrong. So, but like Max Brooks was criticizing today's reliance on technology, people melt down in a blackout because they can't charge their
Mm-hmm.
devices and their whole life
Mm-hmm.
is inside them. I completely agree with that. It's like, as you said, Kat, let's look back 60, 70, 80 years ago. People, I feel like, because they knew that they were so separated from people, if they were out in the middle of nowhere, they just had, I don't know, more common sense about how to deal with things than people do now, because we are so
Right.
reliant. I think we've kind of lost that survival
Well, also
instinct.
too, I do think age has something to do with it too. So I'm really kind of surprised at the older people that were in the community that didn't have the wherewithal and also their experiences. So I guess if you lead a very kind of woo-woo privileged life or whatever, and you've never encountered any kind of adversity, then it is going to be hard for you to, I guess, think that you're going to have to try to survive something really cataclysmic. Because not only were they dealing with the Mount Rainier, but they were also dealing with these creatures, which my thing is, like, there were a couple of characters like, don't hurt the creatures. It's like, what's wrong with you? Those creatures are about to eat your face. Okay.
Yeah, the vegans, they want to believe that they're friendly. I
Okay.
get it. And that's the anthropomorphization, right? It's like the belief that's like, oh, well, if we could just communicate with them, if we could beat our stick, like it's gonna be
No,
okay.
you beat your
Um,
stick and you pissed them off. That's what you
yes.
did.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all you
That didn't
did.
even occur to them. That
Don't
wasn't a
even
thought that occurred.
antagonize that. This is not where these people that think you can go out and hug a tiger because it's so cute because you've seen the Disney
It,
version of one. No,
yes.
I love
Yeah.
tigers. I'd love to hug a tiger, but I'm not going to because that thing's going to eat my face. I'm not.
Yes. Yeah, Jamie said here, talking about like they knew that solar power was good, but they didn't think about what happened when the panels get covered. It's like, well, thank goodness for Dan with his little bamboo
Mm-hmm.
pole going out there and scrubbing the ash off. And Andrew also said it reminds me of the people that go to Yellowstone, get attacked by the bison trying to take a picture, which was something that was talked about in the book
Yes.
by
Yes.
Josephine Schnell, the
Mm-hmm.
ranger. Yeah, and the fact that that is such a common thing, it's like people are dumb. They're
Well, they
so
are. It
dumb.
drives me crazy. It does. How many times have you seen something in the news where someone's jumped into an enclosure with an animal at a zoo or like a wildlife preserve or whatever? And then the poor animal's the one that has to suffer because, this asshat did that. And it's like, that makes me angry. That makes me aggravated. It's like, you you can they're not cute cuddly animals, they are wild animals. Even when I'm dealing with my baby bunnies in the yard and the little squirrels and stuff, I've got to still treat them like they're wild animals. I can't be like cuddling them and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah. Yeah. Right,
and
absolutely.
that's cute little animals, much less Bigfoot.
Much
Hey,
less an
can
8 foot
I
tall
let
ape
me cuddle
person.
your foot, Bigfoot?
And Jamie said the thing about nature is it'll kick your ass. Yes, it absolutely will.
Yeah.
And Faye said she still has a landline. Heidi says, was there a part in the book where they said the government stopped monitoring the volcano too? In real life, they would have been evacuated. It was that funding had been cut. So the early warning
Hmm.
was funding was taken away for people to be warned. So it wasn't that they stopped it wasn't really that they stopped monitoring it because they still knew that it happened. It was just too late. Like at that point, they
Right.
couldn't tell people.
Which again, that brings in politics because it's where your taxpayer dollars
Yep.
going.
Yep.
So again, if your taxpayer dollars are going away, I mean, did Tony know that they weren't going to get warned or that funding had been cut? Like
none
a
of them knew
person,
that.
if you're in charge of, that is why I say they're irresponsible. If you are in charge of, that's like me being in charge of my students and me not being prepared in case of a crisis. Okay. I will ultimately be held responsible because I didn't know what to do, during that period of time. So I have to figure out, everything I need to figure out if I got these little people in my care, right? So it's the same thing with him. I mean, ultimately, he and Yvette were responsible for these people coming here because they all trusted him based on the fact that he was such a great salesperson.
Yes. Yeah. And that leads into the next question too. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. Faye said that was the problem. They wanted to be surrounded by nature but live completely separate from it. I
You got it.
absolutely agree.
Mhm.
And Essie's here. Hello, Essie. Good to see you. So this conversation has me so excited to borrow the book I bought myself for Christmas, Memoirs of the Wild Man by Timber Cleghorn. He was on a TV show Alone. Cool.
Ooh.
I'm not familiar with him, but
Yeah,
I hope that's very fascinating. And you said, "Oh, read the book I bought for myself." There you go. Okay, I got that. Not borrow a book that you bought. Yeah, so the next one was, were you surprised by the trust the residents had in Tony and Yvette, especially Kate and Dan, who recently arrived when everything went down?
I was personally surprised about Kate and Dan. I mean, I don't know if you had this feeling. I had to keep reminding myself that this was over a short period of time. It felt like it was a long time to me.
Right.
Like they had been in this situation for a long time. Literally, Kate and Dan arrive, and that's when the eruption happened. So the fact that they put their trust in him so soon, I was just like a little surprised by that. But then it's like, is it because of their experiences? I mean, they did experience earthquakes where they lived before.
Right.
So I don't know. Did these residents just not do their research? I mean,
can I tell you the immediate vibe I got from Tony and Yvette? So I didn't know exactly where this book was going to go, and it did not go in the direction that I thought, but I can tell you right now, my immediate feeling when introduced to them was cult leaders. That was immediately what I thought because of the fact that it was the trust. It was the fact that they hung on every word that he said, right? Like they could just, like he could say it and he could like wish it into existence basically. And if it weren't for Mostar, like literally that one person, they would have been, all of them would have been dead.
Oh,
like
yeah.
if it weren't for her, every single one of them would have died. And it's crazy to me because I've done a lot of like my own looking into different cults. Like that's something that really fascinates me. That's something I've talked about in like my live shows before. And I just got that it was that vibe of like they're in a, like they were basically in a compound. If you think about it, it was a compound of Tony's design.
Yes. And everything had to be done the way Tony and them wanted it to be done.
Right.
So, I'm just, and then the fact that they didn't, I mean, they were pitiful. They were pitiful.
They were.
They were very pitiful. And I'm going to tell you what, they were so pitiful. I literally thought that they had either run off and left the treadmill running. I thought they had either run off, or I thought they had committed suicide. Those were the two things I thought.
Yeah.
So I was shocked when they were still in the house in the conditions that they were in.
Yep.
Talk about people that could not deal with reality.
Yep.
Those two are the poster children for that.
Yeah. If they couldn't make their reality, they didn't want to be in it, pretty much. And
oh well about everybody else. All these people are here, and they didn't do anything to help anybody. They locked themselves up and just pretended like nothing. They were in denial the whole entire time.
Yeah, absolutely. Jamie has this funny thing. I think the quality of the Max Brooks storytelling is evident in how much it has
Oh yeah, it
camera love.
riles me up. Yeah, these people.
And Faye said, I was thinking cult leaders too. Okay, I was like, we are very aware as a society now of cults. It's like, I almost feel like that's really what he was going for. It's like he looked into the mindset of, and I think that business, like entrepreneurs, are very good at kind of leaning into that mentality because there's a lot of companies out there that have cult like elements as well. Like
Mm,
you don't have to be a part of like a religious cult, for example, to be a part of a cult, right?
hmm.
And I definitely think anybody who can sell you a pitch good enough, like if you don't have like that kind of internal barrier, I guess I'm very lucky because I have a marketing background, so I
Yeah.
always take what people say with like it's like,
Hmm.
how much of that is you just trying to sell me something? But people are vulnerable to that because that's our lives 24/7 now. Like, do you know how many ads you see in a day?
Hmm.
It's insane,
Hmm.
right? Like we're just very susceptible to people selling us something, and there's nothing better than being sold an ideal. And that's
Well,
what
and
really
also
the book's
too, it
selling.
depends. I almost wonder if these people were handpicked to come into this community. I almost wondered, I don't remember them actually saying how they were chosen to be in the community per se. So my thing is, I wonder if how many people Tony and Yvette had to go through to get the yeses to be a part of the community. And maybe that's why those people were not as equipped.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? Like Kate and Dan are only at Green Loop because Frank had a place.
I think there was a tie to Tony that like each of them was like working with him in some way. I mean, I know that Mostar was. It seemed like Reinhardt, like with his stories, had some sort of background with Tony. I could be completely wrong though. Like maybe they were random people who just had the money to do it. Because Frank was, I think, friends with Tony.
Yes.
So that's probably what it was, is some sort of like personal
But then it didn't work
connection.
out. So it wasn't like Kate and Dan. I mean, I think that's the only reason is they were there because Frank still had the
Right.
place there.
Right. Somebody else was able to give that experience to them. Right. So it's like
Right.
they didn't have a personal tie, but I definitely think Kate was so taken with Tony. It
Hmm.
seemed to me, I was like, is she going to have an affair with this
I
man at
thought
the
that
beginning of
too.
the book? I was like, she's
I'm
like trying to
like, oh my
sleep
God.
with him.
I'm like, she is supposed to be repairing her marriage with Dan, and she is like scoping Tony out. I'm like, I hope it doesn't go there. I'm gonna be like too upset. In fact, Heidi even said something to me. Was Max Brooks having? Let me see what her thing was. I don't want to. I want to make sure I quote her right. She was saying, "Oh, I think Max Brooks must have been divorced or been in a failed relationship. He writes about an estranged marriage so well." So I was like, I said, maybe, I don't know. But he dedicated the rest of, I mean, the book to his wife. So, I
Yeah.
mean, not
Yeah. He's
dedicated, but
very
like at the
patient.
end or whatever.
Yeah. He said,
But
I think her inhumanly patient. Yeah. Oh, superhumanly patient wife, Michelle.
right, right.
So,
So my thing is, I don't know, but I was kind of worried. I was like, I hope it doesn't go down that path because I'm going to be mad if
yeah.
that happens. Cause I
Yeah.
don't like, I mean, I'm just like, it's not, then I would be like, well, is the reason why Kate did this and convinced Dan is not to work on their marriage? It's because she wants to get
Get
with
to know
Tony.
Tony. Yeah, I think that's part of like why the descent had to happen so fast. And that was another thing I was really surprised about because of how culty all of it felt. Was like Andrew said, Mostar was a savage. I really liked her character. She was a savage and she put all of that shit. She's like, I'm not taking any of this. I am asserting myself or we're all gonna die.
Hmm.
And I I think that for Brooks, he had to do that because if they drew it out any longer, like he knew that he was going to have to write in more stuff happening, right? Like it just
Hmm.
like there was going to be more people who either went missing or were killed or something. And Mostar was that character that was like, this is going to like start going downhill very fast.
Exactly.
And so I just wasn't expecting them to be dethroned in a way that felt, I don't want to say it was anticlimactic. It was just so sudden. It was like Yvette was like this kind of like a bulldog character, and then Mostar went and like kicked her, and she turned into a puppy. That seems like kind of what happened, right? Is like she's this big bad lady, like I'm running this society, and then
Right.
it takes one event and she just like completely collapses,
Well,
which is
yeah.
really, it shows her character.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked that with Mostar's her phrasing that she used when Dan really kind of started coming into his own. And it was like, adversity is really when you start seeing the true nature of people. And then she looks at him and goes, "It's nice to meet you, Dan." And
Yes, I
Kate
think I
has,
have that. I think I have that
yeah.
marked in my book.
And Kate has that moment too, where she looks at Tony and Yvette. It's like, "Nice to meet you," after they've had their fall and you realize what kind of people they are. To me, that was such a great moment. Like, I love
Yeah.
both of those moments.
I did too. And you know what? I was cheering Dan on. I felt so bad for Dan because we only got bits and pieces and we only got it from the point of view of Kate. And we know how things are. There's always two sides to a story,
Yep.
and a lot of times, like if you have a friend and they're having problems with their significant other, you're going to hear your friend's point of view. You don't hear the significant other's point of view. So, of course, then you're like, oh man, he's a real turd or whatever the thing is. But the thing about it is you didn't get the other person's point of view, so you don't really know 100%. So it was nice to be able to see action, and also I'm so glad that Kate and Dan were able to resolve things, or Kate was able to resolve things. I don't know if Dan really knew how Kate felt about him. He
No,
never
because they had
acted.
communication problems. She said
Yeah,
they like didn't talk to one
they
another.
didn't, but he never ever acted like he felt like he was. You know what I'm saying? Like they're it's almost like that these were her thoughts. This is how she felt. And he was kind of clueless to that. So it was nice to see that his actions and who he really was deep down came out, that Kate was like, truly sad about her man being dead. I liked how she said that. My man is dead. So I don't know. I'm glad that kind of resolved, because I did feel kind of bad for Dan.
I agree. We stand Dan. He came into his own. I didn't like him in the beginning. I was like, what a lame ass guy. And then it was like, nope, actually, I was wrong. I was wrong about Dan. And Faces, it explains their lack of forethought too. They probably believed they were super special. Nothing bad would happen to them. That's my exact feeling, is like you get in this idea of, when I say pie in the sky, I mean people who dream so much that they believe that their dreams are a reality. Like they're just in their head so much that it's like, I'm going to make it happen at no matter what. And that to me is the entrepreneurial spirit
Right.
at its core. And JB says, I think Kate and Dan were the only ones that didn't have a connection to Tony. Yes, I think so too. Heidi says, Mostar did not seem realistic. Sarah
Sarajevo.
Oh, thank you. Survivor just happened to be there. Was like the professor being on the 3-hour tour. They all should have been like Kate. I think they had to have the one person to speak some sense who knew something, because they all were so clueless. Like they all were so soft and had no survival skills.
Yeah, I mean, and Heidi and I talked about that too. I can see Heidi's point of view, but where I think the difference is, Mostar was not experienced with Bigfoot. Mostar was experienced with dealing with a foe that has the advantage over you, and she lived through something that was horrific, and so she knew what she had to do to survive that, and she just applied it to their circumstances, because there were several times where Mostar was like, I don't know. I don't know if this is going to work. I don't, I'm thinking I'm going to do this based on whatever experience she had. She was in survival mode because she already had experienced survival mode. So a person who's been through that, you're going to try to do as much as you can, and you're going to try to shake the people up. And sadly, there are people that you're just going to leave behind. I say all the time, if we had a real zombie apocalypse, I know exactly the people that I'm going to push in front of me so I can go the other direction. That sounds mean, but it's like, you're so interested in your fingernails and your lipstick and your hairdo and all that kind of stuff, and you're clueless about what's going on with you in your life, something really terrible is going to happen. I can't deal with you having a hysterical moment. Like, you got to get on board. You know what I'm saying? I mean, think about it. I've seen people like in disaster kind of things, they can't handle it because they don't have the conveniences. It's like you have to go back to basics. As long as you've got some shelter and you're safe and you've got something to eat and drink, like water is even more important than the food, honestly.
Yep.
So that's where I think Most Star was realistic, is that she was in a situation that she had to survive, and now she's put back in this situation, and she was going to try to tap into the people that she had intuition that could do what they needed to do. If you notice, it wasn't like Most Star went to seek Tony and Yvette out.
No, actually, she initially was like, nah, fucking leave them, until it got to the very end. And she was like, okay, I'm going to actually try not to leave them for dead, which I respected that. And I like the moments in the book where she was resigned. Kate was talking about her having, it was almost like an internal monologue of, so this is what I'm dealing with, right? And so Most Star at one point openly says, I hope I'm wrong. Because she's like, this is I lived in that mentality of being at war for so long that I view everything like this as like, I should treat it as if we're at war. And she sits there, she starts having doubts of like, maybe I shouldn't be, maybe they are actually nice. Like maybe I'm overthinking it and I hope that I am wrong. And then of course she wasn't. And so to me, it was like, without her, it would have just only been a massacre story.
Oh yeah, there would have been no point to the story. I mean, really.
There would have been no growth for Kate. She probably would have been one of the first people to die, because she went out in the woods to try to go look for Vincent's body. Like, Most Star slapped her in the face because of how stupid that was.
I know. I couldn't even believe that. And that was after you saw the boulder move.
Yep. Well, after Vincent, his head is in the fridge.
I'm just like, it's just amazing to me. I have to cough, so I'm going to mute myself.
No, you're good. I'll read some comments. So Heidi said, I like Dan. He was super realistic. Yay, Dan. We like Dan. Andrew, very funny. You don't have to run faster than the zombies, just faster than the last person. That's so true. Jamie says, Most Star had a background of living in constant crisis. Yeah. And I think that I've been very fortunate. I've never had to do that, but from reading like things like from World War II, and like learning about different historical documentaries and what people experienced, there's a lot of PTSD that comes from that. And, people who experience like food shortages, for example, in later stages of their life, they suffer from a lot of mental health issues where they like hoard things, for example, like hoard food, because they're terrified that one day they're not going to have it anymore, because they know what that's like. And for Most Star, like, she obviously was a very strong woman, a very capable woman, but she was scarred by what she experienced, and that was going to be something that was with her for her entire life, which is why she reacted so quickly, is because it's almost like with PTSD, you're thrown back into the emotions of something you've already experienced. And I think that's absolutely, she was reliving previous trauma now presently. So yeah, I agree with that. And Davon says, "Oh, well, I'm back. We watched a new movie." Oh, well, welcome back. Happy that you're here. My next question, I guess we've kind of already talked about this, so if you want to, we can move on. But what did you think of the rise and fall of Tony? Yeah, we already talked about that. Sorry. So what were the parallels between the humans and Big Feet?
Well, both of them, I think their motivations were similar, and that was to stay alive. I mean, both of them were in the situation where they were dealing with the Mount Rainier issue. So they need to stay alive. They both needed a food source, and they also both were dealing with a threat. So it was basically survival of the fittest at this point for both of them. Secondly, they both were communities. You got Green Loop as the community, and then you've got the Big Feet with their lair and their they were referred to like as a tribe or whatever. So they had their community, so much so that they also had young children that they had to care for, just like we have Palomino who's being cared for in our community. So that was similar. Also, I found it very interesting that women were in charge in
Yes.
both communities.
Yes.
And so I that was my stuff with that. And
That
also
was my favorite
too,
part, the matriarchies.
well, what also too is, even though the big feet, they were vicious and all that kind of stuff, I kind of felt sorry for them also,
Yeah.
because they were just doing what animals do
Yep.
when they're in that situation. So it's not, and it wasn't like they would have come to Green Loop and done anything to the community had they not had the eruption.
100%. I agree with that.
They didn't want to tangle with people.
No. No. I think that's why Josephine Schnell was, talking about the mountain lion. Like, that was such a
Mm,
great point in the book of being like, when people originally moved out to Boulder, it was beautiful and peaceful until all the deer came, and then all the lions came with them, and people didn't want to believe that the lions would hurt them until they did. And I mean, I saw a video recently of a mountain lion that chased a guy because he got too close to the cubs. I mean, like, actually chased him down a path, and he like got the whole thing on recording. It was terrifying, right? It's
right.
like that's exactly the way you would expect a wild animal to behave. It's an us versus
Well, and
them.
exactly how a mother would behave. If you
Yeah.
think about it, look at what Effie did.
Yep. Oh yeah, just ripped
I mean,
ripped
she
that thing's
literally went
throat out.
primal at that point and did exactly what a wild animal would do. I
Yeah.
mean, and anyone with common sense knows that you never ever go and fool with any kind of baby animal, because if you find babies, surely mom is somewhere around.
Right. Yeah.
Especially predators.
Hmm.
And I mean, they knew, when my oldest son was stationed in Alaska, they said, stay away from the moose,
Oh
especially if you
God.
see
Yeah.
a baby moose with them, because
Yeah.
they will kill you.
Yep. Moose are
So,
terrifying. I love them. But yeah,
and they're and
I
they're huge.
yeah, I completely agree with you. And that was so I really like the parts of the book where, you have the information by Jane Goodall, which was something I had mentioned earlier, but, her talking about the chimpanzees and the way that they delve out the meat, right? And how it's by order of rank of like the alphas handing out, these little portions to everybody else so that they can eat. And so I liked the differences because obviously we know how our society is. And, I think Max Brooks kind of framed it as if they were monkeys, as if they were chimps. So it's kind of that like, oh, they haven't evolved, like we're more sophisticated than them. They're still wild animals, but they're very clearly intelligent, like very highly intelligent. And so I thought it was interesting in the story when Kate, I think, was commenting, I hope that their brain hasn't developed enough where they can, or no, it wasn't Kate, it was Frank, where he said, I hope that their brains haven't developed enough where they can see their own mortality coming.
Right.
Because, now they know that somebody's hunting them. Like they're going to be able to see their own death, and the realization that they brought this on themselves would be the most terrifying realization of all. And you know what?
Exactly.
There is that part of me after reading this book. I think they did get that. I think that they were developed enough, smart enough that they have a concept of their own death. Like they have probably a concept of their own family unit. I don't know. Maybe that
Hmm.
is me
Hmm.
anthropomorphizing them, but it just seems like that makes sense because their language might not be the same and they might not live in the same conditions and know they haven't developed tools, but they've survived this long out of sight of humanity to the point where we think of them as being
Hmm.
a legend. I think they've got a lot going for them.
Well,
So
and I love the part where they were having conversation and Carmen brings up that they were evil. And one of them says, well, why would you assume that they're evil? And this part right here, Mostar took a breath before speaking. Carmen, they're not good or evil. They're just hungry.
yep.
So
Mhm.
it right then and there, it's like, it's hard like you want to cheer on the humans, but at the same time, you can have compassion and empathy for the big feet because,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm sad that it's not like they were just being vicious to be vicious, because if that was the case, the community would never have been built. They would have known about this happening or whatever. Something
Right.
had to trigger. It's the same way with coyotes. Coyotes get a bad rap also. But
Yeah.
when you're taking away the coyote's habitat
Mm-hmm.
and you're driving them into your subdivision and
Mm-hmm.
you've taken away what they normally eat, yeah, they're going to eat your little toy poodle. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
and I think that's sad. I wouldn't
It
want
is.
them to eat my little dog, but at the same time, I can kind of understand it.
Right. You
You
don't
know,
blame them for their behavior.
you
Yeah.
can't. That's, and then they're the ones that end up suffering, and all they're
Mm-hmm.
doing is trying to survive. Did I think it was horrific how they had to die? Yes, I think their deaths, these people's death, was terrible. But I do also have compassion for it because they were challenged. That's part of the issue too, is they were challenged. Whenever they beat the stick or whatever, that was kind of like a war thing.
Yep.
You basically were challenging them to war.
Did you think it was interesting after Mostar died that Kate became the de facto leader and not Dan? Because I did think that was really interesting because he was the handyman. He became the guy who had like a lot of
He
practical knowledge,
did, but I
but Kate
think,
hung out with Mostar and like trained her, right? So
yeah.
like
And
you
also
need to.
too, I think Kate and Dan's dynamics in their marriage, Kate was the one. I don't think Dan stood up to Kate. And I think that's part of
Mhm.
why Kate had issues with Dan too. Is like, be a man. Stand, don't be a wuss about stuff. Don't just give up because things didn't work out or whatever. So Kate to me was already kind of in charge, the person in charge in the marriage.
Mhm.
So I think it wasn't uncommon for him to do that. Plus, he let Mostar tell him what to do or whatever
Oh
too.
yeah. He was
So I think
cowed
I
very
think Dan
quickly.
I think Dan I don't know if it was respect or not. I don't know. I don't know if it was that or just that his personality, he wasn't very demonstrative. Um I just think that because of his marriage to Kate, that's why he was easily led by Mostar. You don't know what kind of relationship Dan had with his own mother. Mostar might have been a mother figure to him, depending on how his mother treated him. Maybe that's why he was married to Kate, because of his relationship with his mother. I don't know. But I did like the fact that the women were in charge in both cases.
I thought it was really cool. And I did view it more as I think Kate was viewed as the protege of Mostar because Mostar put so much effort into telling her like, "Hey, you need to learn this." And Kate kept being like, "Why? Why do I need to? Why can't you do it?" And I genuinely felt like Mostar's death was foreshadowed so hard because whenever an author's like, "You need to learn this, like you need to pay attention," it's
Right.
like, "Well, why? Why do I need to? Is it because you're going to be gone?"
And
And
that
I,
might be
yeah.
why Heidi feels the way she does about Mostar's
And
character.
I can respect that because I did feel like when Mostar died, I was not surprised. I really wasn't. I
Yeah, I
didn't sit there.
wasn't either, because
I did.
Kate had to take over the reins. What I liked about Mostar is Mostar was a pretty good reader of people. And I think that's because of her experience during wartime. She was
Yeah.
able to know who would be people who would survive and who would not, kind
Hmm.
of thing. I thought the dynamics between Kate and Palomino were very interesting too. It seemed like Palomino gravitated towards Kate more so than her own mom's.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm. I agree
and
with that.
Palomino, we do know that she was in a similar situation where she had bad experiences. So in some ways that helped Palomino, I think, to be able to survive and to know to hide and to do the things that she needed to do, to be quiet, to
Hmm.
kind of like be in the background kind of thing.
I wondered if Brooks was going to kill her I really did. I was happy that she survived because I was like, he might kill a kid in his book. So
If it was Stephen King, he probably
I
would.
yeah, I just had that exact same thought. I'm like, if it was King, it probably would have been over.
Sometimes when Stephen King kills somebody, I have to go back and read to see if he really did that. And I'm like, you went there. I can't believe you went there.
Bastard. Yeah. Well, I was thinking about a different book that I can't say because it would be a spoiler,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
sometimes where you're just like, oh no, why'd you do that? Jamie said Dan was never going to be a leader. He had to have someone tell him what needed to be done. As a handyman, he waited for people to come to him with issues.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jamie.
Yeah, he said he just wasn't proactive. Completely agree with that. So, Kat, what was the moment where things started picking up for you? Because I feel like we've had some spoilers, but we've still been pretty general with certain things. So, what was like the moment where the book was like,
literally when that boulder, the boulder in the road.
okay,
I was like, holy crap.
okay,
Like they, and you see, I would have been on the road. I don't even care about the lava stuff. I would have just gone. Like when the animals started freaking out, I'd have been like, that is my sign. I'd have been like, Dan, pack your bags. We are going. We're going to get ahead of this. We're going to go where the animals are going. Why couldn't they go where the animals were going? Follow the animals. That's what I would have done. I would have followed the animals. But when that boulder moved and Kate just couldn't figure out, well, maybe it's my eyes are hazy and all that stuff. I'm like, no, you saw something. What's wrong with you? I was like, oh gosh, it's getting real. It's getting real.
For me, it was a little bit later in the story, so things became really intense with the rock throwing.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
that was the moment for me where that was the first time in the story I actually felt kind of freaked out because I could picture that so well of like your house being beaten up by rocks, the glasses imploding, you can't go outside, like and I wasn't picturing like tiny little stones either because they were describing like the size of like the strength that they had
Right.
to hurl these stones. So I'm picturing these like bone crushing rocks.
Mm-hmm.
And that got me. When that happened, I was like, okay, stuff's going down now.
And
I
that
like
does
it.
make sense too, as far as like primates. I've
Yeah,
seen like a little documentary one time. They pick up rocks a lot of times to as a tool to open stuff so that they can eat it. So I'm not surprised that they would pick something like that up to throw it, like in defense. I never really, I mean, I've seen and have read things where somebody bludgeons somebody with a rock,
yeah.
stone or whatever. I
Hmm.
never think of it as being something that you could actually harm somebody with, you know?
Oh, I
In a
do.
capacity like this, like I guess I would think about it if that was the only thing I had to use. I guess
Sure.
I would be like, if I was in my home, I would be thinking, okay, I do have a sword, I do have a bat, I do have, you know, I mean, I do have some other objects that I could try to use or whatever.
Yeah,
But yeah. And if you think about it, you would have to have really good strength for it though too, because in order for it to really make impact, you either have to hit them in the right spot, like in the head,
yeah.
or you would have to have the strength to be able to throw it enough to even have the momentum to do anything.
Which they did.
They did.
That was the thing because they were very clearly back in the brush and Kate was talking about like the strength that they would have had just to lob the size of the stone because like one of the ones you remember the one that came through the window and she said it was the size of a mango. Like
Yes.
imagine how hard you'd have to throw that to get that into somebody's house. So like that freaked me out because that's when I'm starting to realize like just how strong they are. Like all it's going to take is one of them grabbing you. And that happens later in the book is all it takes is they just have to get their hands on you and you're done.
It's really funny because the reason it freaked me out a little bit early between the smell and the boulder moving.
Yeah. Oh, the smell.
I
Yeah.
I don't know why I love to be scared by stories with isolation and in where you've got weather also like
Yeah.
adding to the isolation. I just do. It really frightens me because especially like if you're in a situation like this, like they had no way. That was another thing, the reliance on so much technology, they couldn't even pull up a map or anything
Yeah.
to help you. Because literally when Andrew and I went to New York City, we used our phones, our GPS on our phones to get from place to place. I mean, I'm thinking that is
Absolutely.
so awesome, so much more awesome than having to have a map, a paper map. You know, you just have your phone and it would direct you wherever you have to go. So that was another thing too. I mean, but I personally would have left with the animals because the animals would have gone in a direction to get away from their threat.
So that's something that I know we'll talk about in a bit because I do have a question about that, about like how we would have handled the situation. Because I'm gonna pick your brain about that, for sure. But Faye said that Boulder's living in cat's mind rent free. Jamie said as soon as you no longer hear birds or see squirrels, it's time to go. Yeah, completely agree, especially about the birds.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I feel like we've kind of touched on this about like were the Sasquatch hunters or scavengers desperate or delighted in violence. And I think that this one was interesting only because I believe that initially they were scavengers. I do think that they would have stayed away from Green Loop in normal circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I put in the second part of this question is because when the Jane Goodall quotes again, talking about how like they get in a frenzy. Like sometimes they would just
Mm-hmm.
get in this murderous craze and they would just delight in this
Mm-hmm.
violence that they're inflicting upon another animal. I do think that by the end, so it started out as a need, like, and then by the
Mm-hmm.
end it was almost like vengeance, but not
Well, they were
not
being
quite.
challenged. They were being challenged at that point.
Yeah. And so I do think that there was a transition between
Mhm.
just like, oh, you feel kind of bad for them because they're just trying to live to like, oh no, they want to kill you for sport.
Mhm.
That's kind of
Yeah,
what it was.
almost like they get triggered. It's almost like humans have that happen too, if you
Oh,
think about it. And if you've seen movies where people, The Descent comes to mind when I think about that. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but you see something happen, even in human beings that are in such situations where it's like they lose their humanity.
yeah.
And so whatever intellect the Bigfoot had at this point, that they could be peaceful or they're only going to do what they need to do to survive, whatever they had that would be kind of close to humanity,
Hmm.
they lost that humanity.
It was a switch. Yeah. I think
There
Frank,
was. There was a switch in that. And I think it was the same. Even Frank brings that up, at the end. If Kate, if that's one of the
I want to talk
scenarios with
about that.
Kate, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So
Yeah.
my thing is, depending on, I think it's that brink. And then if you almost wonder if they could ever go back and once you've had a taste for it, can you go back? It's almost like a lion that has a taste for blood, a human. They're going to become a human hunter at that point, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Um,
I like that quote from Frank during his interview where he's talking about the alternate idea of the big feet because a lot of people were like, well, maybe big feet, they were just like peaceful people who were trying to get away from the humans and they went before and then humans followed. And his take was, oh, hell no, they were following us. We were their food initially, right? And so it just became that we outnumbered them and then they got triggered to realize that we were their food source again.
right.
And I liked that take. I like the ambiguity of it as well, where you don't really know like what the truth is in this story of like, were they peaceful and they were doing it just because, or did they used to hunt us? I don't know. But I thought that was cool.
Yeah, and that's the one thing also too about Frank was talking about the core philosophy of Green Loop. People are the problem, nature is your friend. Nature is
Yeah.
not your friend.
No, it's not. Nature will kick your
You
ass, as Jamie
you
said.
you are a guest in nature's home. So you
Yes.
should act accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Teresa's so sweet. She stopped by, said, I'm not part of this group, but I love you both so much. Just had to stop by to say
Oh,
hello. We love you too, Teresa. Thank
thank
you.
you so much, Teresa.
So Kat, I do want to ask, what would you have done if you were a resident of Green Loop? So specifically, if you were a resident there, and you said you would have tried to leave as soon
I
as the
would have left.
animals.
Mhm.
So here's my question about that. Here's why I want to pick your brain, because we saw with like Vincent, for example, when he went out by himself, he got attacked, right? And he went out prepared. He was trying to find something. He got eaten. Would you not, in this situation, have viewed it as like if you had left, you would have been trapped out there with them? Like they would have followed you?
No, I think Vincent left too late.
Okay,
I
so
think
you think
that's
that
what I'm
it's like
saying. I would have left.
when
I
it
would have
happened.
left when the animals started acting strange.
Got
They
it.
were already getting clues. They were getting the weird smells. They saw the rabbit that had been the dead. Wasn't it a
It
rabbit?
was a
That
deer.
was a deer.
It was
But
a
I thought there
deer.
was also a rabbit.
Mostar
Maybe
killed a rabbit.
Mostar killed a rabbit. Okay. But okay, so when she saw how that was, and then also the smell, like that to me is like something is off. And then for the animals to act the way they were acting, I personally, I mean, just I don't know if it's because of all the stuff that I've read and everything. It would have just freaked me out. I would have wanted to go. I would have rather take my chances and be able to try to get out, because if I was going to die anyway,
Hmm.
whatever was in the woods, because at that point you didn't know what was in the woods.
Right.
You didn't know, but you knew something. Even if it was a bear, even if it was a bear, a man-eating bear at that point, that
Hmm.
still would be scary. You would still have to fight. You wouldn't necessarily survive that
Hmm.
kind of thing. I think I would have told Dan, I think we have to go. And just knowing my personality, my husband's personality, Barry would have been like, we need to get the hell out of here. Like
Okay.
something is wrong. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Um, and I know that they had that block and thing, but that couldn't have been the only thing. And even if I had to drive until I couldn't drive anymore, you know what I'm saying? I would have tried to drive out as far as I could drive. And then if the bridge is out, then I would have to figure out another way. My thing would be go in the opposite direction. And the thing is if you could have somehow masked your scent to where it would have been like not appealing or
Hmm.
whatever, I would have done that too. I mean, that's what they do with zombies.
No,
They put
right.
guts all over them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know
I
if that's
think.
true or not, but I mean, I'm just saying, I think I would have just taken my chances. And Kate was physically fit enough to be able to do that, you
I
know?
I think the thing I enjoyed about the way that the story was set up is how they because of course we don't have a map of where Green Loop is because that's part of the fun, right? It's like they didn't want to give the exact location of where it was located.
Hmm.
We just knew that it was near Mount Rainier. So the way that they described it was, it's up on this kind of like near an overlook. One side is mountains and the other side is the road that leads down to the bridge, right? But that's also
Right.
where the molten landslide happened. So the bridge is out, you can't drive. The molten landslide, you can't walk through that, of course. And then the other side is scaling mountains. So I
Mm.
think that they did a really good job of trying to show that, like, had they tried to leave, there wasn't anywhere they could go, which is why Tony initially left to kind of scout. And we don't know what he
So
saw.
then,
We know he
well,
came back
that's the other
rough.
thing too. That's the
Yeah.
other thing too.
Yeah.
He was not
So,
forthcoming with it. And so I guess that's when he decided to give up. Like there was no,
yep.
but my thing is, where did the animals go? The big feet did not eat all the animals.
I
They
think
had
they
to
can scale
somehow.
mountains. They can scale cliffs. I believe
I
in
know.
them.
Well, and this is what my husband would tell me if I was telling him this. Because when did this happen? Like early on in the book? This is how I am in movies. These people are so stupid. Why are they doing this? I would not do what these people are doing. You never go into a place without any kind of light or what. My husband's like, then it wouldn't be a movie.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, it's true. It's true. I can't think like a rational person. I don't know. I don't think I could have stayed. I think it would have made me freaked out to stay. And then if I did have to stay, then I would have just had to fight. But
I think
I don't
I'm with
know.
you that I would have tried to leave, but I think the way that the story was set up is I would have realized that there was nowhere to go and I would have had to turn back anyway. And I think it would have resulted in me just having to
Well,
endure.
yeah, yeah. I think that would be the same
So,
thing. I think that would have been, I mean, but at least I could say I went out there and tried.
mhm.
Now, I guess the only reason Kate and Palomino could be out there now is because the lava is probably, cooled off
Oh
enough that
yeah.
they can travel and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And hopefully the big feet are too scared of Kate.
I oh yeah, the different ending possibilities are awesome.
Oh
Um,
my
Heidi
gosh.
said that the book mentioned the prior sightings, there were guns involved. If they could have shot one, I bet they would have fled away. Oh, 100% I thought that too. If any one person had a gun, it would have been over.
Which
And
that's another thing that I'm a little bit surprised about. I mean, I don't know what the laws are where they were at, but I do know that they had all these rules about, all that. But I'm just kind of surprised that they did not. Some of the things I was surprised about were the fact that they didn't have like a weapon or a flare, or even Heidi. Heidi brought a perfect um, scenario because her thoughts on surviving. She said, "Did anyone have an SUV they could use to ram them down, or was the Sasquatch just so big for that?" I think they were too big in order to do that. Um, then also too, you took the risk they had multiple Sasquatch, so if you did that to one, it's just a matter of them coming and landing on the SUV, and then you would have
what
been
happened to the
smashed inside.
Tesla? That
Right.
happened to
So
the Tesla, so
they should have built a big signal fire for any helicopters above and kept it lit to keep them at bay in a ring of fire. Also, you would think since they got their food from drones, they could have storage of that natural disaster food, freeze dried stuff. Forget volcanoes and Bigfoot. What about blizzard that could have buried the entire community? So that is the part where I agreed with Heidi. That's 100%. They had snow. So even if this whole disaster didn't happen, they could have been snowed in
mhm.
to the point that their drones couldn't have come. And then they didn't have any extra food or anything like that. So you can't, that's why I'm just thinking to myself, like, they didn't think about flares. They didn't think about having a gun just for protection. What if some weirdo people, mountain men, like in Deliverance, came and got them? I mean,
Mhm.
that's not out of the realm of the possibility. How would you defend yourself?
Yeah, no, I completely
Also, too,
agree,
why did
and
they not have anybody at a station? Like, why didn't they have like a park ranger? That's another thing. Like, they should have had somebody, a designated somebody, in the case of an emergency. Please come check on us,
right.
or please let authorities know that we're there, or
That would have been too much prep for Tony. Nothing could ever go wrong again. Nothing could happen to him because he believed that everything was perfect. And I like what Heidi said too. There's no such thing as monsters. I would have loved to see this volcano erupted, drive out, then hike out. Oh, but I it did actually bring up. I wasn't sure whether I was going to put this question up or not. But were there things that you would have done differently to survive, or thought the characters would have done differently? I wanted to talk about one of the things Heidi brought up, which was setting the forest on fire. I 100% had that thought. They're hiding in the trees, light it all up.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, what
The
you're
only
worried it's
thing
gonna
I
touch
don't
your
know if
house?
they would have been able to do that is because of the snow.
Yeah, things being wet. Well, I don't know. They blew up their house.
Well, but they blew it up because they had the methane.
Right.
So you would have had to somehow
Siphon it, I
siphon it,
guess.
which I did think that was a good idea to blow it up. I mean, I got their attention for sure, and it did take out a couple of people. The only thing I didn't like about that was then it's like your shelter is gone.
Mhm.
Like unless they thought they weren't going to make it out alive, and they were
Yeah.
going to take as many people down with them as they possibly could. I mean, clearly when it came to hand-to-hand combat, the big feet were going to win because they just size. They had size on their side. Also,
Mhm.
too, they were used to living in the conditions they were living in. So you're
Mhm.
taking, people that are not used to living in that kind of environment, not knowing. That's why that was one of the things that I put on my list was, do you think that anybody who is a resident should have had some kind of wilderness training?
Yeah, that was the question for you. Yeah. I 100% agree with you that they should have. And I think about my trip that I just had out to Crater Lake, for example. So I've never been in a place that is so devoid of cell service, like ever in my whole life.
Oh,
And
wow.
where I was so secluded that if anything happened, I was screwed.
Mhm.
Like other than we had a vehicle. So I want to be clear about that. We did have a vehicle, but if anything would have happened to that, screwed. Because when we went into Crater Lake, the forest fires had been happening and like all the smoke had been blowing in. The air quality was really unhealthy. We saw a forest fire start while we were there. Like we were
Oh, wow.
literally driving around the rim. And we were talking to the park rangers because they had all these piles of sticks everywhere. We're trying to figure out like what are these piles, and they're like, "Oh yeah, those are for controlled burns so that the whole forest doesn't burn down." Like you're talking about all these things, and I couldn't have if I had wanted to tell my family, like if something happened to us,
Right.
I wouldn't have been able to tell anybody. Like nobody would know. Um, and so, and that was my first time experiencing that. So I guess like, in that way, I was kind of like a Kate or a Dan, right? But I don't think they had any plans of necessarily living there long term. Like some people who were planning, I think that was just going to be their home forever. If I knew I was going into that, I would have all these preparations because the
Mhm.
initial going there and realizing how desolate it is would have scared me enough to realize that's what I needed, right? So like if I was going to live in Crater Lake, after driving there and being there for a few days, I would have been smart enough to realize all the other stuff that I needed, if that
Well,
makes
that's
sense.
why I was a little bit surprised that Kate and Dan were not as prepared, considering that they were basically house sitting for Frank. I mean,
I think it was because of all the talk of like how close the city was and like the fact that they did still have internet. I really don't think that they considered an option where they weren't going to be available to civilization.
right. Well, that sounds as naive as New Orleans, that the levees would never break and it's a fishbowl during Katrina.
Right. I completely agree. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, how many times did people have to say that this was a possibility and nothing was ever done about it? So, I mean, I get it, but I don't know. I think that this is a perfect example of, you have to learn from the mistakes of others. So
Yeah.
if ever anybody, a Tony number 2 came along that wanted to come up with his idea of having this community, I think they would learn from their mistakes and do something totally different. Although,
There's always a Tony number 2 cat.
I know, although now people are aware that Sasquatch lives. And so you're going to have people that are going to deter people from even being in that area because of the danger of that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, Andrew said I would have at least had a 72-hour bag in my pistol. Yeah,
Mhm.
Jamie, I agree with Jamie. Said I want Cat on my team in an apocalypse. Cat, I'm driving to your house. I'm staying with you.
I learned everything. I learned everything I know from The Walking Dead and Max Brooks's
The zombie
survival
survival guide.
guide.
That's great. Andrew said, yeah, but if they did, they would have potentially been out of their homes in the winter. Yeah, like walking
Yeah.
around in the wintertime. That was the other thing is had it been any other time of year, obvious answer would have been to walk away, but he had to make it cold, right? He had to
Well,
make it
that's
dangerous,
the
die of
whole
exposure.
that's the whole thing about these kind of stories.
Right.
I mean, I read The Shuddering in January, and it's the same premise. You've got creatures, for whatever reason, needs to come into a community. They just kept getting braver and braver, kind of thing. You've got a group of people in an isolated place, and of course it's going to snow.
Yes.
Of course it's going to
Absolutely.
snow. I mean, look at The Shining. Of
Hmm.
course it's going to snow, and you're going to be locked in there. I mean, different circumstances, different kind of
Right.
monsters, right?
Yeah.
But anytime you have any kind, I think that's what it is what I love about it is who's going to survive? How are they going to survive? That's what I want to know, because the
Yep.
things you do, or if they're dumb, I'm not doing them.
Yep. Yep. I love that. Gotta stay alive.
Alex and I are not. We're going to tell you right now. Alex and I are not going to join any green loop type communities.
No, surely will not. I also am not joining a cult, so I want to be very clear about that. So no salesman could ever pitch me anything. I don't trust them. Nope.
Oh my God.
Faye says someone made an "If People with Common Sense Were in a Horror Movie" short film, and I think that would be Cat. Slightly creepy things happen. Cat, nope, out of here.
Yeah.
I agree. I do feel concerned sometimes that I would be the person who would go down in the basement, but I want to be very clear that if I went down in the basement, I would be armed. So it's not just like, I wouldn't just walk down there.
Look, Kelsey and I just went to Krampus's haunted house, okay? And I know that was totally fictional, that people cannot touch you, they cannot do anything.
Yeah.
But it was creepy. And of course, it's not as well lit. I mean, you could still see pretty well or whatever. But like, you weren't expecting someone coming around the corner or whatever. It's like, that is what would happen to you if you were in the basement. It would be in there. It's going to get you.
See, I don't have a basement, so I don't have to worry about it.
I don't have a basement either. I have an attic, and I'm not afraid of my attic. But
yeah, no, I'm not either. Somebody would end up stepping through the drywall, and then they'd be stuck. So I'd be like, yeah, trap them. I'm like a spider monkey in my attic. Nobody would want to try to chase me up there. I've been up there way too much. Faye said, I feel as though schools should give kids some amount of survival teaching, because a lot of people find themselves in dangerous situations and are cool. It seems like important life skills. So I actually have a dear friend of mine who works for a college, and his prior job is he worked at actually his high school that he graduated from, and they were required to do active shooter training. To see the way that they would respond in that situation. His response was perfect. He did a great job. He survived the encounter, but my college actually did active shooter training as well. And I completely agree that everybody should go through that, because you don't have to be at a school, obviously. Like, you could be in a theater, you could be anywhere in public. It's good to know how you respond.
I do think, because I was a Cub Scout leader for many, many years.
I can see that for you, Kat. I can see that.
I had to step up for Andrew. I had to step up for Andrew and do Cub Scouts, and I think a year and a half of helping with Boy Scouts or whatever. But yeah, I mean, we learned some good stuff in Cub Scouts. So
that's awesome.
That's one reason why I had the question. It's like, if you're going to be that close to nature, don't you think you should have some kind of survival, like wilderness survival skills? I mean, come on.
I agree. Heidi said it was interesting that Tony said they will rescue us, then the author made the "they" super busy with rioters in Seattle. I think that ties into what we were talking about earlier of them not understanding about the budget cuts. Like, they don't understand that. And I loved the park ranger. She was one of my favorite characters because she added so much perspective. I really liked it when she was pointing at the map and she's like, do you see where they were? I want you to understand, we weren't even looking for them. We were all the way over here. We didn't care about what was going on with them. And this idea that people think they're so important that somebody's just going to remember to come for them. It's like, why? You didn't plan for anything. You didn't tell anybody. Like some people know about your community, but it's not like you're super uber famous. And they don't know the exact location of where Green Loop is. That was established at the very beginning of the book. People don't know exactly where it is.
That's another thing too. That was another thing too that's very cult-like feeling. Is like, you only are allowed to come in if we want you to come in.
Yeah.
Because if we don't have outsiders coming in, they can't influence you in any kind of way. Like, they didn't even have a delivery truck person or whatever. Like, it literally was a drone.
Yeah.
Or a van that didn't have a driver or whatever. I'm like,
it's all about the awe. They have to keep awing you with this community until you're stuck there and the awe turns into horror. I mean, I do like their houses. Sorry, go ahead.
but literally Tony, basically they all are dead because he was lacking preparation.
Yeah.
Except for Kate and Palomino, we think. We don't know.
Andrew said, no Colts for me either. Faye said, I live in a basement and I do hear weird noises sometimes. Yeah, that would not be fun, Faye.
My sister has a basement. She lives in Atlanta and she has a basement, but it's really nice. Like she's got one part of her basement, it's like a little movie theater. And then she's got her office. And then there's a lot of storage and stuff. It's not a creepy basement with cobwebs.
That's
like it's
nice.
A functional,
like most basements.
It's functional, whatever. I definitely would not go into a creepy one with cobwebs.
No. Faye said it's super sad that kids have to have active shooter drills. I was talking more about learning what you can eat when lost in the woods or something.
Yes.
That too. Right. I'm sorry. I took that in one direction, so forgive me. But yeah, I completely agree that we need to teach people practical skills. So it bugs me about people who decide to risk their lives for stupid reasons and someone has to risk their life to save you. Yeah. I feel that way about people who go diving in underwater caves. Like there's so many activities that like thrill seekers do. And I don't think that the mentality of Green Loop was by any way thrill seeking, but I do think it was extremely arrogant.
Yes.
And I think that the inherent idea about thrill seeking is the arrogance to believe you are the one that can survive. Right? Like think about all the people who were dead on Mount Everest. Did they think they were going to die when they went up there? No, yeah. That's why they went.
And they were prepared.
Some of them were. Some of them were. Famously, there are people who died because they were very wealthy and they paid somebody to take them up. So it really depends.
Okay.
But yeah, the JV said the idea that they thought resources would be diverted to save 10 people when there's a whole state in crisis was ridiculous. Yeah, yes. That's what money does. Because Tony, I mean, he didn't say like how rich he was, but you had like a famous author, you had a doctor, you had an artist. I don't remember what I don't know if they ever said what Frank and his husband
I don't remember.
Did. But they very clearly were well-to-do people. You'd have to be able to live out there,
right,
and get drone service. But Kat, this leads me into my very last question for you, which is, what do you think happened to Katie and Pal?
I picked the scenario. My scenario I picked was, where did I put it? I know I wrote it down somewhere.
There were 4, right? 4 that
there was 4 of them. I picked. I know that where's Frank's thing? I thought I wrote it down. Oh yeah, I did. Hello. I picked scenario 3. I think she's in a cave in the mountains and she's trying to get to safety. I cannot see Kate, especially with Palomino. I cannot see Kate being like a vigilante and is going to try to hunt down every last Bigfoot out there and kill them and put Palomino at risk unless Palomino died at the hands of one of them. That's the only way I could see that happening. But I'm thinking scenario 3 because I think they're still alive. And the only reason I say that is because of what they found. The fact that they had the dehydrated beef jerky.
Yeah.
You know, they were smart enough to have the meat and all that kind of stuff. And I could see Kate having enough. She had enough time to think while she was burying the bodies. She had enough time to think while she was dehydrating that meat to get a good enough plan. And I bet you they were waiting for a moment when the conditions were right for them to walk out of there. And also, too, like Frank mentioned, maybe going on like little day things to kind of scout out to see what was going on.
I loved that idea. And then the reason they didn't come back is because they just didn't realize that the day was going to be that day, right? That they didn't return.
Right.
I like that idea a lot. I think part of me really loves the vigilante idea. Like part of my heart really wants it to be that, because picturing Kate in just this rage, right? This blind, vicious rage at Dan having been murdered, at Mostar having been murdered, at having experienced everything that she did, and the way Frank described like Kate using Palomino to flush them out because they're now
Oh
terrified
yeah,
of this
yeah.
tiny little girl because that means that Kate is somewhere nearby. I love that idea. I won't lie, I kind of want that to be the truth. Not that I want all the big feet to be hunted down and murdered. It's just like I could see, like, I love Keaton like dearly, and I know that you love Barry, and it's like if somebody came and something came out of the woods and killed Keaton, I would probably want to kill that thing, like whatever it was.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
I could see Kate doing that if she didn't have Palomino. I
right,
just couldn't
right.
imagine Kate, especially the fact that they both survived. And I think they probably gave another thing too that I considered is she buried the bodies and they had the time to do whatever in case they thought somebody would eventually come for them. So they
Right.
wanted to stay a little time there. And apparently the big feet were not a threat to them at that point, I would
It's just
think.
kind of strange that they left that much food. That's the thing that's odd to me is
Well,
like they could have survived.
unless they just decided, nobody is going to come for us. And maybe, like he said, maybe that was the day that they didn't go back. They had it and they could survive there as they were scouting out and doing whatever they had to do. But they didn't have enough that they could bring with them. They would have had to bring, I'm kind of surprised that they didn't bring all the dehydrated stuff with them, but maybe it
Right.
was so much that they physically couldn't carry it because you got to consider if they have packs, they've got to have something to have shelter and clothing and some kind of medical supplies, whatever. So you got to think it's not two adults going out of there. It's an adult and a child. So
I do think that makes the most sense too because they didn't leave a note. I liked that little detail as well. It's like, well, they left all this food and they didn't leave a note, so they probably didn't know that they weren't coming
right.
back.
And the whole point of them, I thought that was smart of her to leave all the devices and the notebook. And I know how the park ranger felt. Like she was like, I really wish I would have known about the video or whatever. I would have charged it to look. So it's a shame that she didn't get to read the whole journal prior to turning everything over. But I think that's why they left anything, just in case if they happened to go out, somebody would know. And then I also thought they left things just to let them know that, you know what, hey, we're out there. We're still out there. Come find us. The only thing that I thought was kind of odd is a way for them to have marked a trail of the direction they went in. So that way, when they finally got to Green Loop, if they could have seen a path of where they went. Like, I think if I was in that situation, I would have wanted to bring something that I could have marked, and hopefully whoever came would recognize that.
Right.
Or perhaps that's what I would have left a note and said, look, if you come upon this, we are hiking out of here. We're trying to find a way out. We are marking it with XYZ, glass, whatever. And then that way they could have led them to wherever. So either they were going to see their dead bodies or they were going to find them.
That makes
Or
perfect sense. Yeah.
Palomino and Kate would have found a road and hauled out. The only way I think that, this is just me, the only way I think that Kate would go into like vigilante mode is if something would have happened to Palomino.
Yeah, I could see that. You have convinced me. You successfully convinced me. Great job. And Faye said, I agree with Kat. So I have been overruled and I am fine with that. No vigilante Kate. So Kat, after our discussion, what do you think your rating is going to be? Have you changed your opinion? Has anybody like changed or re-solidified their opinion? I still say 4. Still happy with it.
I think I'm going to go with a 4.5.
Okay.
Because it's not quite a 5 for me, just because of just some aspects of it. but I liked it more than World War Z in some
Mhm.
aspects, and I gave World War Z a 4.
Yep.
So
So
I
you
think
and I
I'm.
just flopped on that one because I liked World War Z just a little bit more, but we both. Hey, that's still great.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
I
it's still
think
books. A
I
four and a
think a
four and a half.
4.
That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
So we've been very lucky, Kat. All three
I
books
know.
we've read for this. It's funny though for me because my ratings have gone 5, 4.5, 4. So that better not be a trend for the next book we read being a 3.5. I want to
Yeah, and
maintain like
I'm looking really forward to the Winter People because I've been wanting
yeah,
to read that for a long time,
yeah.
and I'm hoping I'm not psyching myself up.
I get that. Well, I didn't know anything about it, so I'm excited. But funny enough, I was just at trivia on Tuesday with my friends, and my friend Mel went, "Have you read The Winter People?" And I went, "Well, as a matter of fact, we're reading that for our book club." And she was like, "I might join for that." So I'm excited.
Ooh,
I'm
yeah.
excited. That was hilarious that
See,
she
what
just happened to
happened
like that.
was we when I was doing Chills, Thrills, and Kills with Kelsey in our book club, we try to do seasonal books kind of thing. And that January, we had asked people to put out for, like make nominations. That's how we would vote
Mhm.
on it. And the Winter People, the Shuddering, and I want to say I'm not going to say the Devolork Pass or whatever, where the people, the hikers in Russia or whatever it was that were killed
Oh,
in their
yeah,
tents. Well, they
yeah.
had that one, which was nonfiction, and then something else. I don't know if it was Near the Bone or something. Anyway, the Dalatov Pass is
Mhm.
what
I
ended
know
up
a lot
winning.
about that
I
book,
loved it. We
actually. Yeah.
loved it. It was a um, very good book, I thought. And fascinating story, in my opinion, um, about what actually happened to them. Anybody has never read it, I think you should pick it up.
I'll have to look into that now that I have done my foray into nonfiction. That sounds like something right up my
But
alley.
so what ended up happening was the Shuddering and the Winter People and Near the Bone all sounded fantastic. I never did get Near the Bone, but I ended up getting the Shuddering and the Winter People, and I read the
Okay.
Shuddering last year during January and loved it. So,
Well, everybody get ready for more winter stuff. More winter is coming. Um, but Kat, I just want to say, and to everybody else who came tonight, thank you so much for reading this book along with us and joining us in a conversation. We always have so much fun talking.
oh,
So
did you see Jamie's comment about the strips?
yeah, I put that up.
Okay,
They could have cut strips of cloth to mark their path that wouldn't be heavy to take up much room. I thought about string. So it's funny you said that because if they had a piece of clothing that's made of string, you can unwind it, you can strip it and circle that around trees. So
hmm
that might have worked too. It's probably what I would have done.
and I would have had to leave a message or something just so they would know to look for it. I mean,
Right.
some people might have figured it out, but depending on how they started off.
Faye says, was the book Dead Mountain Cat?
I have the book. It's Dalatov Pass. Let's see. Let me see if I can find the book. I can recognize the author's name. It's oh yes, it's Dead Mountain. Yeah,
Oh, nice.
yeah, that's what
Good
it
job,
is.
Faye. You said
Yeah,
there are a
oh,
few books. Well done.
yeah. I enjoyed it. Finding out about it. That's what it looks like for anybody who's. But it's this
Oh,
guy,
cool.
Donnie Eckar or whatever, or Icar, was so fascinated with it that he ended up researching it and went there. And I give him kudos for doing that because it was kind of scary digging into that information.
Heidi's asking, was there a fourth one? Dead, Cave, Revenge Spree, and what? I think the other one was just the idea that they just walked out one day, that they weren't like deliberately hiding in a cave, but they were just somewhere out
Right.
there, like
And then they
walking.
finally came upon a
Yeah.
road.
Oh no, I remember what it was. Yeah, that they're like in a hospital somewhere,
Oh
And that
yeah,
was what he said. Frank was like, I'm hoping that the hospital's going to call me one day, that they're going to come to, and Kate's going to be like, yeah, I made it out. Call Frank.
yeah.
That's what it was. That's right. And Jamie said, another great book selection. You two are hitting it out of the park. Thank you. We've gotten very lucky so far. We want to bat 1,000 every time.
Oh, I know, I know. I'm curious to see, because some of our book selections next year, you and I are tiptoeing into territory we normally don't tiptoe in with the
Yes.
spell shop. I will just
Yes.
have to say, but I have been fascinated. I have been fascinated, and that I literally wanted to buy that book purely because I love the cover and I love
Yeah,
the
it is a
book.
very
The
pretty
book is
book.
beautiful. It's like, so I'm
Mhm.
really hoping. I'm hoping it's going to be good. The three that I, chose, I've been wanting to read them. And then a couple of ones you suggested, I was like, oh, yes. Only one of them, it's the one,
Chain Gang All Stars.
yes. But
Yeah.
I am looking forward to it because of the premise of it. And I love
Yeah.
that we have some strong female characters that, I'm just curious to see how that's going to work out. The whole competition kind of thing. And
I love your selections. I would have to say, of the three that you picked, the one I had thought about buying the most was Deacon King Kong.
mm,
So because that's like exactly my kind of book I would normally gravitate towards. So I think it's going to be a fantastic year. But the good news is I can talk all day about books that I like, but when I hate a book, I talk even more. So just get ready. If I don't like something, it's going full rant central. It's just gonna be nonstop. You've seen my book reviews. It's gonna be intense. So I'm hoping that we're gonna love them, but just in case we don't,
I
Spell Shop
know. I
is the
know.
one I'm most concerned about as well.
Well,
That one was
yeah.
one of mine. So,
No, I was excited that you picked it because I had, like I said, I had that one. What has been on my radar, and I remember Alicia Yo, Alicia IA. Um, she had read it. We had talked about it, and she had read it. I had seen it on Goodreads one day, and she said she enjoyed it. So I was like, oh, okay, well that's good. But it's fantasy and a little romance. I don't know
yeah.
how much romance. That's the thing. I
I
don't know
think it's
how
going to be
much
cozy.
romance.
If it's
Yeah.
cozy, I'm feeling good about that.
Yeah.
If it doesn't lean too much into anything and it's just a light, fluffy, nice,
As
light,
long as it's
fluffy story.
closed door romance.
Not necessarily. It doesn't have to be. I just don't want that to be the whole plot. That's what I mean. Like you can have some
I want
spice.
it
I
to
just
be
don't want that to be
closed.
the whole book.
No, I want it to be closed door.
Okay, that's fine with me too. If that's what it is, I'm fine with that. Faison, I'm excited about all your picks except Spell Shop. But you're making me want to read it, if only to share the potential rantage. Yeah. So we're gonna all find out together. But either way, we'll be holding up a very pretty book.
Yeah, so our next selection is in the new year. It's
Yes.
January, February is the Winter People. I forgot to
got it
pull my
right
book
here.
off the shelf. Very
There you
good.
go.
And our meeting is going to be on Thursday, February the 27th.
Yep.
And the reason I remember that, it's my niece's birthday.
Nice. Very, very nice. But thank you again, and thank you all for joining. It's been
Yes,
fantastic.
we appreciate y'all being here with us. This is the icing on the cake. Y'all are like the icing on the cake, for us to have some other
100%.
readers talk about it.
You listen to us talk for 2 hours every time about one book. That's love. That's dedication right there. So thank you all. Heidi says it is romantasy, not the epic stuff I love. It's definitely not high fantasy, Heidi. I can promise that. Jamie says thank you. Thank you. And Linda,
thank you,
great
Linda.
stream
We
discussion. Thank
appreciate y'all
you.
very, very much.
We said love you, gals. Good night, everybody. Good night to you too, Faye. So thanks, everybody. Bye.
Good night.